Just a cautionary statement here that we will be talking about some forward-looking information in today's presentation. So, Entrée Resources has been around for a while. We were formed around a joint venture in Mongolia on, at the time, was a very interesting project, and now has been earmarked as the third largest copper mine when it's in full production in the world. Our flagship asset is the joint venture. It's a very specific joint venture that has a lot of characteristics of a royalty, yet the benefits of a producer, and I'll get into a bit more detail as we move along. And some of the main aspects of this include a very low risk profile in that capital and development and operational risk are all vastly reduced. And once again, I'll explain that a bit more. We're well funded. We have $7.7 million US in the treasury, and with our current burn rate, which is about $1 million a year, that carries us through to full production and cash flow. So there isn't a need to go back and dilute at this point. Our cornerstone shareholders are Turquoise Hill and Rio Tinto, who are heavily involved and are the principal owners of the Oyu Tolgoi project. And of course, Sandstorm Gold, who came in and did a large financing for us in 2013, remains as a very large shareholder. So this, I'm going to get a little pointer out here. This map here basically shows our land position. The gray area in the middle is held by a joint venture between the Mongolian government at 34% and Canadian company Turquoise Hill Resources in a 66-34% joint venture. They hold what's known as the Oyu Tolgoi project. Now, completely surrounding that in blue, this is the joint venture ground that we have a 20% ownership of with the joint venture company called Oyu Tolgoi LLC. Up in the far northwest, there's a large block that we own 100%. However, there is an agreement in place to possibly roll that into the joint venture at some time in the future. Along here is the trend of porphyry mineralization. This is about 12 or 13 kilometers long of almost continual high-grade copper-gold porphyry mineralization. In the middle, there's an open pit, which is currently in production called Oyut. This is on the ground that is not part of our joint venture. To the north of that, there's a deep deposit, which is called Hugo Dummit. Hugo Dummit is one of the most spectacular copper-gold porphyry deposits ever discovered. It trends northward, and it crosses onto our property right here, and at that point, we call it the Hugo North Extension Deposit. At the far end down to the south here, there's another very large property which is called, or project, which is called the Heruga deposit, and that is almost entirely on the joint venture ground. There are also some additional brand new surface exposures here that are very early stage prospects, but the interesting thing is on any surface prospects, we would actually have a 30% interest, not a 20% interest. So even though they're very early stage, we're watching those very, very carefully. So the next slide, I'm going to look at a slice through the earth along this entire strike length right here. So once again, in the middle, this is the gray area, which is held by Oyu Tolgoi LLC, and the blue area to the north or the right, or to the left or the south, is the joint venture ground. Here is the Hugo North deposit. Where it crosses onto our property, this red area right here is what's included in our reserve case. This is currently being developed by our joint venture partners. They've raised $5 billion to build this underground block cave. Block caving is effectively a low-cost underground way of mining. It's bulk mining underground, very similar to an open pit. A lot of capital intensity up front, but once you set the block cave going, costs are quite low. Below this, very importantly, and this is the exciting thing that we were able to bring into our recent technical report, is what's called Lift 2. A much larger percentage of this occurs on our property, as opposed to Lift 1. And we're also bringing in all of this Heruga mineralization into a brand new study, which is called the 2018 Preliminary Economic Assessment, or PEA. So if we look at some of the outputs here in terms of a production highlights, which are attributable to the joint venture, that yellow area that we were looking at before is 35 million tons attributable to the joint venture of almost 2% copper equivalent. However, the joint venture, or the PEA, includes 113 million tons of indicated resources and another 708 million tons of inferred resources. So a much, much larger pool of mineralization that's attributable to the joint venture. Entrée has the right to 20% of that mineralization. Some of the costs involved with this, and the important thing is we do not have to raise any cash to contribute towards this. We are debt financed at a rate of prime +2 by our joint venture partners to pay back our capital. Our capital is quite minimal because we only pay for our attributable amount of underground development on our property. We do not pay upfront for capital on their property. However, as we use their infrastructure to mine this, we do pay a usage fee through amortization. So let's look at the economic outputs of this. On an NPV basis, the reserve, which is that little yellow bit, is worth $111 million NPV, discounted at 8%. The PEA is worth almost 3 times that, $278 million NPV, discounted at 8%. However, given the low risk, royalty-like nature of our interest, there are groups that would say we should be discounting at a lower level, more like a royalty company would, which would be closer to a $500 million NPV of our interest in the joint venture. This is a quick production profile that shows you how long this can go on for. Hugo North Lift 1 and Lift 2, so going back to that map, that's the yellow bit, and the orange bit is where the majority of our value lies. That would be a 33-year mine life that would be that we would not have to raise any capital for. There would be a small break in the mineralization between that and when Heruga comes in, as our joint venture partners mine other portions of their deposits. Heruga would continue for another 30+ years, going way out into the future. It provides us with zero NPV value at being that far out, but we start to look at this more like an annuity, something that would be very interesting for a royalty company. They like long life projects, and the other possibility is at some time in the future, Rio Tinto could look at increasing the throughput of this mine from the current 100,000 tons a day upwards of 260,000 tons a day, and the effect would be moving all of this mineralization further this way and closing that gap. So we'll stay tuned on that. So in a summary here, we have characteristics of a royalty, yet the benefits of a producer because we do take product in kind. So this sort of project would be interesting to royalty companies, but also metal trading companies as well. And as I said, our agreement allows us to have our capital financed by Oyu Tolgoi LLC at prime +2%, which is a very attractive rate. Just as a quick comparison here, if you look at a comparable company, our best comparison is our joint venture partner, Turquoise Hill Resources. It's the same basket of mineralization. So if I extract out the open pit mineralization and just look at their underground as a comparison on EV versus copper equivalent pounds, they are trading at about 11 cents a pound right now. We are about 1.7 cents. So there's a huge disconnect on the same mineralization. So we're pretty much out of time here. Moving forward, we will continue to inform the public about how de-risked this is. We will continue to talk to various other groups that might be interested in a project like this. But in the meantime, it's being developed, it's being de-risked considerably, and every month that goes by, development is moving closer and closer to our property boundary, and in 2021, we become a producer. We switch on an accounting basis from a developer to a producer. Just quickly, that's an overview of our company. We have a lot of information at the booth, and I'd be more than happy to come to talk. People come by and talk to me later.